So we'll get started. As you can see, we're also talking about psychological safety. Can you hear me? Okay, there we go. I love stories, so I always start with stories whenever I'm talking, because that's just how I listen to people. Whenever there's a story shared, I perk up and I want to listen. So to be able to talk about why this is important to me, I need to start out by sharing a story, what started this all. As a newer educator, you know, the imposter syndrome's real, and I got really focused. I'm like, I'm gonna make sure I'm really prepared, and one of my main focuses ended up being content creation, right? It's like, I'm gonna make sure I have all the content, and that it's gonna be done in a way that I'm gonna expand their knowledge base. Like, I'm just gonna be one of those great professors who are gonna talk about it as an A student. Now this has become my new job, right? How can I get A's from my students? Anyway, so I got focused on content stuff. And I was teaching, so I follow a group of students for 3 semesters. And I will give my introduction in a few seconds, but in a few minutes. Anyways, I had a student in my class, and it was a course that we had been together for about 2 semesters. And there was a class, it was at the end of the semester, and she raised her hand and she said, "Oh, Dr. Garbett, I have a question, and I'm really embarrassed to ask you this question because it's the course, it's the title of our course. And I'm really embarrassed, and I kept it for this long, but I can't anymore. What does this mean? I don't really know what this means." And at that moment, here I am, right? I thought I was doing a great job. I've been organized, I have done the content, and she asks me a question that I think is basic to me because it's my course. And at this point, everybody else in the course, in the class also raised their hand, and they're like, "You're not alone, I feel the same way. I don't know what that means either." And I just paused in my tracks. I'm like, oh my goodness. So that's where this comes from, because it made me wonder, this was a term that, you know, to me was not complicated, and here they were so nervous to ask me because they don't want to come across as not smart. And at that moment I realized, because education is so important to me, it's a privilege that I'm here today. My family in India don't get to have this education, so here I have come full circle where I get to actually be playing a role in educating other students. And maybe part of me is shutting this down by how I'm creating this classroom space. So then I did a little research, and I came across psychological safety. Like, this is what I want to do. This is what I should be doing in my classrooms. So before we go into a little bit more detail of what it is, what we've done in our classrooms, I want to introduce myself. I am Cynthia Garbett. I grew up in India. That's where I lived before I moved to the US. And I'm a psychiatric nurse practitioner, which also makes me think why this is so important to me, to make sure not only do my patients feel like they're in a safe space, I want my students to feel that so they can go recreate that for my patients in the community. So now Mandy, I will let Mandy introduce herself. So Mandy and I teach a Professional Roles 1 course. And in this course, we actually talk about very black and white topics like racism, structural racism, social determinants of health, right? Not complicated at all. A space where I really want to make sure that there's not just one perspective that's being heard, but lots of different perspectives. So that's where we implement this, the psychological safety aspect, and how we do it. We're going to be talking about the Professional Roles course.
Oh. And my name is Amanda Keddington. I am a clinical instructor at the College of Nursing and also a doctoral student there. And I'm lucky enough to teach in Professional Roles 1, which is composed of first semester nursing students. So, Catherine did such a great job introducing the concept of psychological safety, but bear with us because we're going to talk about it a little bit more. So, psychological safety is a belief that individuals can express their thoughts, their ideas, and concerns openly without fear of negative consequences, ridicule, or retribution. This is really important, especially when you consider what we're talking about in our class, right? We're talking about racism, we're talking about health inequity, we're talking about these topics that there's lots of opinions about, right? And lots of different life experiences. So it's really important that people feel safe to share their opinions even when it deviates from the norm. that might be openly discussed in the classroom, right? It's also a sense of comfort and confidence in knowing that your voice is valued and respected. It's also a space that fosters trust, collaboration, and creativity. So what do we know about psychological safety? This is something that has been found to be a hallmark in high-performing organizations, that's in businesses, in high-performing hospitals, magnet hospitals specifically. So it's very well studied in acute care settings. It's also a standard in simulation, right? And that's a huge focus in simulation. But do we use it in didactic-based classrooms? We did a literature review and we were really not able to find much at all about this being utilized in didactic spaces, which is arguably a space where students should feel safe to express their opinions, to question what we're discussing, and to make sure that they are advocating for their perspectives.
Okay, so what have we done? One of the first things we do when we start the course, the first day of class, right? We're nervous, the students are nervous. We recognize that so it doesn't just take over, right? So what we do is we observe the energy of the class. The first day we walk in, we notice, because we've been teaching this course now 6 times. Is this our 6th? Yeah, we've taught it a few times.
It's blurring together.
Yeah, and the first day of class, we notice the differences. There's some cohorts that are really quiet and they just stay in their spots, and then there's some cohorts that are more talkative and they're hanging out with each other. And based on the energy level, we change how we approach the first day of class and every class. We also teach our class right after a CM course. It's a very intense course where they come in and they're overwhelmed. And there was one time where they came in and, anxiety is contagious. We could sense it as they walked in. They're just like really upset. And yes, we have an agenda for our course. For every class day, we have an agenda, but we paused. And we actually took the time to say, hey, we noticed you guys are looking stressed out. What's going on? We spent the first 10 minutes talking about this. We came up with a few plans. What are your studying strategies? So we actually survey the classroom energy. And that's a big deal for us, because I think if we can't get them to see that, yes, we see you, they're not going to talk back either. And our class is all about discussion based. We also do a lot of collaborative expectations, which means at the first day of class we also set classroom norms, and it's not just us setting the classroom norms. We actually do a survey that's anonymous, and we ask them questions like, tell us a classroom where you felt safe, like when you were able to speak up, what made the difference? And then we go through the responses together too, so they can see what we're doing and what everybody in their classroom is saying also. Role definition, yes, there's some certain rules that are just set, right? And we share that with them, and we also share about what we as faculty members, we call ourselves facilitators, because again, we want this to be a shared experience. So we share what our role will be, meaning when will we give them feedback, when will our grades be done, and then we also tell them like these are some things we expect from students. You tell us, what do you think? And that's also in the survey questions that they'll answer. The classroom structure. It's very organized, so students when they're anxious, they feel safer when it's organized. They know what's expected of them, and you can see it in our Canvas courses. We have an agenda. What are we doing at 9 a.m.? What are we doing at 9:30? Do we stick to it sometimes? No, and we let them know when that's not happening either. Connect to a purpose. We talk about psychological safety at the first day, every single class time. We ask them, hey, remember when we talked about this? Remember when we talked about our classroom norms and you guys said this was something that was a priority to you all? Or do you notice, are we doing this, or are we kind of swaying away from it? So it's a classroom discussion when we also see the norms going away. And we also practice empathy and model vulnerability. So when we talk about psychological safety, we're more likely to share our perspectives about complicated topics and be more willing to take risks, because there are no specific one answer to these topics we talk about. So in order to get everybody to be able to be engaged and participate, what we've done is we do a why story at the beginning of the class. It's one of the assignments that we do where we talk about, tell us why you're doing what you're doing type of thing, and there's an assignment attached to it. And we don't just ask our students to do it, but we also do it. And we share our why story, and we ask our students to share their why story. And that's one of the most common themes that we've noticed in our student feedbacks, is how much they enjoy that, how much they feel like it's not us and them. They feel us sharing their story makes us all feel like we're in this together. And that's what this classroom is. And I think that's really what our society is. Knowing that we're not alone, we're in this together. And our favorite thing that we also do is a self-reflection, like earlier in the speaker. It's not fun, right? I've gone home and I've read these self-reflections and I've said to my husband, maybe I should not do these anymore. Because not all of them are great. And we do self-reflections for every single class in a way asking them, so now you're in charge, tell us what you would keep, what you would change, what you would add in type of assignments. And those have been really helpful too, because again, we're showing them we're facilitating this classroom. We're not the experts, but together when we share each other's perspective and we share our lived experiences and share how I see this, there's more likely to be able for us to change, right? Because psychological safety is getting our partners, people that we work with, to be able to share their ideas and for us to be able to change our minds. And that's something we talk about. It's okay to change your mind when we talk about these classroom discussions and topics. So Mandy will now talk.
Okay, so what are some of the things that we have found? Oh, you were actually going to talk about this.
This is me.
That's okay. We like to talk together.
What have we as faculty noticed? Collective responsibility. What that means to me is it's never on one person. We're all in this together and we share the responsibility. If there's a question that's thrown out, there's been lots of questions that have been thrown out that I'm just like, I don't know, that's a great question, and I pause. And Mandy will step in, or there's been times when my students will step in. There was a question once that was asked, I'm so sick of people asking me where I'm from. What do I do when patients ask me this? And my response, right, as an educator, I'm curious, I'm like, well, you tell me, what do you think would be helpful? Because people are gonna ask, I'm just wondering, how do you want people to approach this? And then another student of mine raised her hand and she said, Dr. Garbett, that wasn't fair of you to ask her that because it's not her job to educate us. Great point, right? And here I am just dripping sweat. I'm like, yes, I know that. Yeah, you're right. And then I had a few other students start raising their hands and they're like, when people ask me, I use sense of humor. And then another student raised her hand and she said, when people ask me where I'm from, I'm very honored to share it with people where my country. And then another student, well, I think it's really hard on me because it's that reminder that I don't belong. And I don't like not feeling like I belong when I try so hard to do what needs to be done to be part of this group. So we have discussions like this where, yes, I don't have the answer to some of these questions, and I don't have answers to all questions, and my students are willing to recognize that and step in, and they share the stage. We share the stage with our students. It's never Mandy and I at the front and they're over there. Our goal is for us to be in the back and for them to be teaching. We also practice active listening, which we're not listening to respond, but we're actually listening to hear, yeah, tell me more. I wonder where that came from. And we also build connection. Our students will still see us in the halls and they're so excited and they'll talk to us about what they're doing in their other classrooms, or they've shared stories what they've done at their clinical settings. And the togetherness, right? The example I gave, we're all in this together, and I love this. And we always say this to our students, these are topics that are going to be uncomfortable, and that's okay. We're gonna work on this, we're gonna be hard on this, but we're gonna be easy on everybody around us. Let's practice grace, let's practice respect. So hard on the people, hard on the problem, easy on the people.
Thank you. I also want to share one thing that just happened like the end of last week that also applies to the outcomes. I think we had a student that came up and they had a discussion in another class that was a hard discussion, and a student shared their perspective, and they kind of moved on past the perspective, right after, and the student felt kind of bad, that they had shared. And one of the other students came up and said, hey, you know what? I was so glad that you shared. And she came to us and was like, hey, I remembered what you talked about. And I was able to kind of help bring that into another classroom to help with that discussion. So anyhow, I love that. So this is an example of a student review. This came from our student evaluation at the end of the semester. And this was really representative of what we found in our reviews, which were that Questions were asked. This course is a positive conduit for sharing personal experiences and learning about tricky social elements, right? Those are some of the things that are just so hard to teach. Also appreciate their skills in asking the right questions to elicit great conversation and then ultimately learning. Now, are all of our reviews perfect? No, and they shouldn't be, but this was a good representation of that we are trying to facilitate this positive environment in our classroom where people feel safe to share dissenting opinions. A few challenges we've had. One is the class size. Huge classes, it's really hard to overcome this. Student disengagement is, of course, another common issue that we really just kind of trend and then we'll collaborate with each other to address it. Reserved and silent students, this is also a difficult strategy, but there are many strategies you can find online and in academic journals to overcome this. And then also lack of diverse perspectives. So one thing that we really try to do is bring out those other perspectives from previous semesters so that we are addressing those. And that's everything we have for this. So thank you so much for letting us present.
I just really quickly want to add something. Just because we set this up does not mean every student speaks up, right? That's a challenge we notice, like reserved students, silent students, and something we do remember is we collect data. The first time we notice that, we have a discussion about it. We remember that. If we notice a pattern, then we address it. And for our students that are more reserved, right, we always in our classroom remind them, you don't have to participate. We would love for you to participate. And if you're unable to do that, if you have questions, please come to us. And my biggest victory is I actually had a student, right, we talked about microaggressions and she came to me at the end of the class and she disagreed with something that was said in class, but she didn't feel comfortable saying it in front of everybody. And she was able to come to me at the end of the class and not after 2 semesters. And I take that as a victory for me.
Thank you. Yeah, go ahead.
So what you're doing is of paramount importance.
Yeah.
And I cannot underscore it anymore. The area where it's especially important is, so what you're talking about is cemented in the University of Utah in the Student Bill of Rights. It's the University of Utah policy. Everything you're covering, at least most of it is already there.
Yeah.
But the areas, like the people who are not covered are the residents, because residents are not matriculated students. A student in the course is defined as matriculated students. So residents kind of fall in this crack between being trainee but not matriculated student and the kind of in between student and a staff. Yeah. So apparently this policy is not applicable to the residents. And you can read voluminously, like years after years, how residents are trying to adopt Resident Bill of Rights, which exactly covers the topics you are presenting now, cemented for the matriculated students, but yet somehow not applicable for the residents. And again, I appreciate the job.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. That's really interesting. Do we have time for more questions? Or okay, we're done. Thank you. Oh, and here's references if you're interested in reading more about this.